Hey everybody, I hope that you're well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today we'll be doing our grade 1 English lesson on action verbs. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username, as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English language arts. We're doing grade 1. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to our chapter of action verbs. So of this is a continuation of a previous lesson, um, where we also did action verbs. So now we are going to continue and then end our lesson here. So we're going to still do action verbs today. All right. So our chapter is action verbs. Our subject is English language arts. We're doing grade 1. And then the lessons that we are going to be focusing on today under the chapter of action verbs. We're going to use action verbs and identify action verbs. So that is going to be our lessons for today. We're going to identify action verbs and we are going to use action verbs. And remember, when it comes to verbs, right? When it comes to verbs, then a verb is basically an action, or we can say it's a doing word, or we can say it's doing. It's something that you're doing, right? That is basically a verb. It's an action, it's something that you're doing. And when it comes to action verbs, right? Or let's say just when we generally talk about action verbs, then we can basically just say a verb tells you what the person, animal, or thing does. So basically, the verb, yes, it is the action, but a verb tells you what the person, animal, or thing does. So that is our a verb, all right? So it either tells us what the person is doing, tells us what the animal is doing, or it tells us what the thing does. That is the verb. And if we look at an example, right, we can say the dog, what does the dog do? Barks. We can say the cat jumps, right? And we can maybe say that we play. If we look at those three examples, right? These are three examples of action verbs. The dog barks. So, which means that this word barks, that is our action verb. So, what is the dog doing? The dog barks. So, barks is the action that the animal is doing. If you look at the next one, it says the cat jumps. So the word jumps. What is the cat doing? The cat jumps. So jumps is our action verb. It tells us what the cat is doing. We play. So which means that this word play is our action verb. So this is what an animal does. This is what people or person does. And if we maybe look at something that a thing, maybe we can say also the thing. The balloon pops. So the balloon pops, right? So which means that this word pops, that basically tells us what the thing does. It tells us what the thing does. So those words barks, jumps, plays, and pops, those are action verbs. And if we also look at more action verbs, so we basically said a verb, it tells you what the person, animal, or thing does. We can also say that an action verb, it basically describes action. It describes the action that takes place. And if we look at words that basically, like we would say, describe action, then we can say words such as, there we already have jumps. To kick is an action verb. Kicking a ball, kicks a ball. Smiling is an action verb. Even if you're shedding a tear and crying, that is an action verb. Thinking is an action verb. It's something that you're doing. Eat is an action verb, something that you're doing. I'm eating. I'm going to eat. I'm eating my food. Something that you're doing. Run is an action verb, and play is an action verb. That is but a few examples of action verbs where it describes action. It tells us either what the person, thing, or animal does. All right. And then here we see that we have examples of action verbs, and we said it is barks is an action verb. What is the dog doing? The dog barks. That is the action that the dog does. What is the cat doing? The cat jumps when the cat saw the mouse. We play outside because it's a beautiful and hot day. Yes, eat is an action verb. Well done. And the balloon, what's the balloon doing? It pops one by one. Those are action verbs. It tells us what the person, animal, or thing does. It's an action verb. And an action verb, like we said, it describes action. Where you're doing something. If you're playing outside and playing with your ball, you kick the ball. Kicking is the action. It's something that you're doing with your legs. Kick, smile, cry, think, eat, run, and play. Those are but a few examples of action verbs that describes action. It tells us what the person, animal, or thing does. All right. So now, if we look, we're going to write down a few sentences, right? And in the sentences, we are going to identify the action verbs within the sentences. So I'm going to write down a few sentences, and then you are going to identify what the action verb is within that sentences. All right. Oops. All right, let me just move this over. Okay, so now we're going to write down a few sentences, right? And then we're going to identify the action verbs. All right. So now, if we look at, let me type it, at action verbs, right? We said action verbs, it describes an action, it tells you what the person, animal, or thing does. That is an action verb. And if we look at an example, not example, but if we look at sentences, right? So we're going to write down a few sentences and then you're going to identify what the action verb is within that sentence. All right, so the first one is, we can say she is eating breakfast. Or we can say she eats breakfast. Let's keep it like that. That is the first one. The second one says, Kim talks to Miss Kelly. Let's make up our own ones. Number 3. Remember, this is not just me writing down a few sentences, and then you're going to identify the action verb within that sentences. No problem. We can say they play football. You can say the bear runs after me. And the last one, you can say the kids brush their teeth. All right, so now here we have our 5 sentences. And now we're going to identify what the action verb is within those sentences. We need to say what the action verb is within these sentences. And once again, we said an action verb, it describes an action. And who does the action? It tells us what a person, it tells us what an animal, or it tells us what the thing does. That is an action verb. It tells us what the person, animal, or thing does. It describes the action that they are doing, right? And that is action verbs. And if we were to identify the action verbs now within these 5 sentences, it says she eats breakfast. She eats breakfast. What is our action verb within that sentence? It says she eats breakfast. What is she doing? She eats breakfast. And if we were to identify the action verb within that sentence, and then we can say eats is our action verb. Eats. That's the action verb. All right. If we look at the next one, it says Kim talks to Miss Kelly. Kim talks to Miss Kelly. We need to identify the action verb within that sentence. Kim talks to Miss Kelly. And if we were to identify the action verb that tells us what Kim does, then we can say talks is our action verb. It tells us what Kim does. The next one is they play football. They play football. Yes, well done. Talks is correct. Talks is correct. And if we look at the next one, it says they play football. What is our action verb? It says they play football. We need to identify the action verb. So they play football. Number three. What is our action verb? And if we were to identify our action verb within the sentence, it says they play football. And then we will choose play as our action verb. What are they doing? They play football. So play is our action verb. Yes, talks is correct. Now it says number four, the bear runs after me. The bear runs after me. What is the action verb within that sentence? So not she, the bear runs after me. The bear runs after me. And if we were to choose the correct option, then we can say runs. That is our action verb. Runs is our action verb. And then the last one says, the kids brush their teeth. The kids brush their teeth. What are the kids doing? What are the kids doing? We need to say what the kids are doing. So the kids brush their teeth. We need to say what the kids are doing. And if we were to identify and select our action verb, and then we can say brush, it tells us what the kids are doing. So these are our action verbs that we have identified, which is eats, talks, play, runs, and brush. It tells us what the person or what an animal or what a thing does. Describes the action that the person, animal, or thing does. Right? All right. So now we're going to a+students.ca, where we are going to first identify action verbs, and then we're going to use action verbs. All right, and we see that a verb, it tells us what an animal or what a person, animal, or thing does, right? A verb, it tells us what a person, animal, or thing does. And we made an example of the cat jumps. What is the cat doing? It jumps. We play. What are we doing? We play with our ball. We play with our dolls. We play on our phone, but we play. All right. So now we're going to look at a activity where we're going to identify the action verbs or the verbs, and then we're going on to our test. Oopsie. All right. So now it says we need to find the verb. It says our teacher reads to us. So our teacher reads to us. So our teacher reads to us. What is our action verb within that sentence? The action that is being done. And if we were to identify our action verb or a verb, we can say, our teacher reads. So, reads is the verb, it's the action that is being taken place. All right, so reads is our action. It says Ross eats an apple. Ross eats an apple. What is the action verb or the verb within that sentence? Ross eats an apple. So Ross eats an apple. And if we find our the verb, then we can say eats is the verb. All right, so now we're going to our test where we're going to identify action verbs. It says the balloon pops. What is the action verb within that sentence? The balloon pops. Is it option one, the, option two, balloon, or option three, pops? What is the action? What is taking place? What's happening? All right. So if we were to select the correct option, then yes, we will say pops is correct. So well done. Pops is correct. The next one says the car stops. The car stops. So the car stops, and we will say stops is our action verb. It tells us what the car does. The next one says the babies sleep. The babies sleep. So the babies sleep. So is our answer the option one, babies option two, or sleep option three? What is the action verb? It says the babies sleep. And if we were to find the verb, then we will say option three, sleep, because that tells us what the babies are doing. All right. Now we're going to use action verbs. We have identified action verbs. Now we're going to use action verbs. right? And now we're going to our test where we're going to use the action verbs. We're going to choose the correct verb or the correct word in, and then we're going to choose the correct word and use it within that sentence to complete that sentence. So Tim and Jill. So Tim and Jill, do we say guess the answer option 1, or do we say happy the answer option 2? What do they do? Do they option 1 guess the answer, or do they option 2 happy the answer? Which one is correct? So guess or happy. So Tim and Jill guess the answer, or Tim and Jill happy the answer. And if we were to identify our, or let's say if we were to use the action verb, we can say Tim and Jill guess. Yes, guess the answer. So well done. Guess is correct. So option 1, guess is correct. The teacher story, option 1, a book, or the teacher reads a book, option 2. Which one is correct? The teacher story, a book, or the teacher reads a book, option 1 or option 2. All right, so we need to complete the sentence with the verb. The teacher story, or the teacher reads. And if we look at that sentence, we will say the teacher reads a book. So well done. Reads is correct. It tells us what the teacher does. We need to complete the sentence. It says the king. Do we say book at the story, option 1, or do we say the king laughs, option 2, at the story? So we can say the king, option 2. Option 2, we can say the king laughs at the story. So well done. Laughs. That is our action verb, right? And then the next one says she. Do we say she home a funny noise outside her room? Or do we say she heard, or hears, sorry, a funny noise outside her room? And laughs is correct. Well done. So she home a funny noise outside? Or do we say she hears a funny noise outside her room? We need to choose the correct option. All right. And if we were to complete the sentence with the verb, we can say she hears a funny noise outside her room. She hears a funny noise. Well done. Hears is correct. The next one says on the farm. Do we say he goat the pigs? Or do we say option two, he feeds the pigs? And if we were to choose the correct option, right, then we can say on the farm, he feeds. What is he doing? He feeds the pigs. Yes, well done. Feeds is correct. So feeds is correct. So on the farm, do we say he goat the pigs or do we say he feeds the pigs? And if we were to choose the correct option, then yes, feeds is correct. Then the next one says Colin. Do we say water into the cold pool or Colin jumps into the cold pool? And if we were to choose the correct option, the verb, the action verb, it says Colin jumps into the cold pool. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on action verbs. We said action verbs, it describes the action that is taking place and it tells us the person, animal, or thing that does the action. That is an action verb, right? All right. So this is the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, grade ones. We did action verbs, and I really hope that you have a better understanding of what action verbs are. All right, so this is the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, grade ones. Have a good day further. Goodbye.